Dear colleagues, welcome back to the conference. Good afternoon, Christoph. Good afternoon, Paul. Welcome to the virtual conference, Compliance Functioning Banks. Chris, nice to see you again.
Hi, nice to see you too.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us on this conference. Sorry, again, it's virtual. I have promised that next year we'll be live, and I hope so that you will be able to join us again. Good afternoon, Paul. Welcome to the conference.
Thank you.
Okay. Are you well? Okay, everything is fine. Technically okay. Okay, perfect. Today we will have opportunity to listen to presentation regarding how to use data, human intelligence, and advanced technology to fight financial crime. I would say that we are continuing with the same topic. Before you, we had the presentation from UniCredit. My ex-colleague Marijana Stanisavljević present us all details regarding how they are dealing with the data and how they are processed and what they are doing with that. And I hope so that your presentation will be inspirative like her was. And please start and take a time. We are not in hurry. This virtual room have one very good situation is that we don't have a time limitation, but on the end, keep going, okay?
Brilliant, thanks. Thanks for inviting us back. Yeah, unfortunately it's virtual again, but hopefully it's the last time. I really miss the yearly trips to Serbia. I've been doing this conference for 4 years now. I think it's 4 years. And I was thinking the last couple of weeks how great the weather was in Palić 4 years ago when I was there. I was short sleeves and everything.
It's same in Belgrade now. It's very nice weather.
Yeah, today we have nice weather, but the last 2 weeks here in Vienna have just been horrible. They've been absolutely horrible. But next year, I'm looking forward to Serbia and good weather.
Okay, perfect. Next May, Serbia.
Yep, looking forward to it. Well, like I said, I've been doing this for 4 years now, and I'm very, very happy to be back. I've brought along a guest today, a very good colleague of mine, Paul Iazzi. So I'm glad that he can join this with me today and help present it. And while he's pulling up our PowerPoint presentation to go through, I'll introduce us one more time. So my name's Christopher Stringham. I manage a team of pre-sales consultants for Refinitiv in EMEA. Our focus is on our risk and compliance solutions. You know us primarily for WorldCheck. A lot of people on the call are WorldCheck clients, and we're very grateful for that. There have been some changes to our organization. You're probably getting used to this. I think I mentioned a year and a half ago that we were Refinitiv. We've been detached from Thomson Reuters, and we were an independent company called Refinitiv. Well, Refinitiv was bought a couple of months ago by the London Stock Exchange Group. So we're now a part of the London.
It's news.
Yeah, it's definitely advantageous for us for a number of reasons. It gives us a bit larger scale, a little bit larger reach. It means that we have more access to places where we want to be, more access to data. It's quite good. I'm very, very happy about it. And this means that we are a much bigger organization now with a lot of different areas. So we have 3 big divisions. We have data and analytics. That's where WorldCheck is sitting. This is where we provide the data services to our clients. So we're not the trading platforms. It's another division. That's the capital markets division. And we also have a post-trade division to help things out. But we sit in the data and analytics part of the organization, and that makes sense. We're providing the WorldCheck data to our clients to help with their risk management processes. Next slide, Paul. And so within data analytics, we're divided geographically into Asia, EMEA, and Americas. Me and Paul are EMEA, as you can imagine. And in addition to the customer and third-party risk solutions that I represent, we also have various solutions for the various parts of the financial services ecosystem to help out. So yeah, it's kind of new. We're constantly changing and evolving, but London Stock Exchange Group is a great organization with a long history, and we're really happy to be part of them. But don't worry, the World Check branding is still there, so you can just keep calling us World Check.
Yeah, clear. That was my question in the end. Okay, thank you for the answer. I was worried very much.
Yeah, I've gotten really used to whenever I answer the phone, I say Christopher Stringham from World Check. It saves lives. Yeah. Next slide, Paul. All right, so this is going to be my next last slide before Paul takes over. And so what do we want to talk about today? We want to talk about data in fighting financial crime. And you guys have seen this slide before. I've been showing this slide for years now. And depressingly, this slide is still up to date. Danske Bank is still in the news for money laundering things. There was a news article a couple of weeks ago saying that their troubles aren't over yet. Deutsche Bank is still popping up in the press. BaFin said a couple of weeks ago that they need to invest more energy into fighting financial crime. De-risking is still a trend that continues to happen. And the European Union is still passing new AML-related laws. I mean, really, every one of these actual headlines is 3, 4, 5 years old, and they're all still up to date. That's depressing. That's very, very depressing. Now, what are we going to do about it? I mean, to a certain degree, a lot of people are already doing a lot of good things. It's kind of hard to say what actually the problem is because, we're investing, as an industry, we're investing a lot of money into this area. I think, there's a lot of discussion in the community about what we have to do, adjusting the suspicious transaction reporting regime and things, more laws, new laws. We'll talk about that a little bit. One of the ideas is that, yeah, we have 6 money laundering directive in the EU now, but maybe we should go to a regulation instead of directives and things. We'll get into that a little bit. But the point is that financial crime is here. It's not going away. And in order to really fight this, a bunch of things have to come together. One, we have to have corporate cultures that take fighting financial crime seriously. We also have to have regulators who are not only passing laws, but they're enforcing laws. And then the last point is we need the tools and the information to actually be able to do the job that we want to do. As an organization, we want to be helping on the data side of it. And to provide the data that you need and the community needs, what's critically important is understanding what we're even looking for. We provide data based on open source information. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of information that could be incredibly useful. Unfortunately, nobody has the time and resources to spend weeks Googling every single client in a retail organization. That's unrealistic. So you have to have the data in an easy and efficient way and in a manner that actually helps you identify the risk you want to identify. And that's where World Check is, I think, unique. We were the first ones doing this. We've been doing this a long time. And the real differentiator between us and other people in the market is that we have a very large team of researchers, almost 500 researchers now, and we know what we're talking about. And that's because we're constantly looking at the issues. We're seeing how things evolve, and we're seeing the things that matter to you as a community. And we're willing to listen. If you tell us our PEP inclusion criteria doesn't make sense, we talk to you, we talk to the regulators, and we adjust. So what's going on? What's new in the last year or year and a half that you guys want to know about and that we're collecting data on? And to talk about that, we have Paul to take us through the next slides.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Chris. My name is Paul Lezzi. I am a part of Chris's team here at Refinitiv, and we work with our clients to better understand where World Check can give them a lot of benefits and where Refinitiv is investing their money to make the role or job of compliance simpler, easier, more efficient. So in support of that, each year Refinitiv produces a true cost of financial crime report. Now, typically, compliance activities are seen as a cost or an expenditure, and from a company bottom line perspective, they're always looking to reduce that overall cost. Now, our goal of this true cost of financial crime report is to highlight, well, if you're not investing your money into compliance wisely, what are the potential outcomes or consequences of that? Because typically what we see is that those consequences or outcomes can be much more expensive if you aren't allocating the proper resources to this. So some of the things that we highlight in this report each year are opinions or thoughts that we see. So in this year's report, we had over 3,000 compliance individuals across 24 geographies. And out of those respondents, 72% are saying that they're aware of financial crime taking place in their global operations within the last year. And that's pretty significant. This isn't something that only affects a small population of the world or of the financial and commercial ecosystem. This is something that affects almost 3/4 of all organizations. And the cost to do these checks are increasing, so it's important to be smart about where you're sending that money. Some other trends that we're highlighting in this report are, what is the impact of this? So out of those respondents, we see that 67% are hesitant to report these overall issues. They don't want that reputational risk. They don't want to sour the relationships with their clients. Ultimately, they don't want to lose business. And that's understandable. But what we do want to see is that collaboration gets to the forefront of fighting financial crime. So if 2/3 of respondents are hesitant to report these issues or talk about them, then there's a significant population that aren't communicating or addressing these overall topics. Now, some of the other reports that we study or look into also kind of shine a light around the information we're seeing. So the UN releases a report each year as well around crime. We're seeing that 5% of global GDP is coming from illicit proceeds of organized crime alone. So we still see a large presence of organized crime in the financial ecosystem. 1/20 of all the money is coming from illicit proceeds. And out of that, less than 1%, and we kind of see this number, it's really hard to tell exactly what that number is. You don't know what you can't see. But what is sort of widely recognized as the figure is around 1% of proceeds are actually seized or frozen by law enforcement. So if you kind of flip that around and say, okay, if I'm in a business where I have a 99% success rate, that's probably pretty attractive. So that's something that definitely needs to be addressed because if criminals can be less successful, if financial crime has substantial punishments and can be deterred, then we can see less attraction to actually partaking in this criminal activity. So just some more numbers that we also see from the IMF to kind of go along with that UN report. We're talking trillions of dollars when it comes to financial crime. This is on par with probably the GDP of Canada, which is a top 10 global economy. So once again, these are very significant numbers that we're talking about. And another implication of this is if this money is going to organized crime, there's also this money leaving legitimate means or benefits to society, such as tax revenue that can be used to better the lives of global citizens rather than it going to criminals that could be negatively impacting society. So now what we're going to talk about is some of the trends that we're seeing. Refinitiv tries to stay at the forefront of analyzing and researching financial crime so that we can keep our world check and our other third-party risk and compliance data and software platforms relevant and up to date. So what we're noticing in some of these trends that we're seeing over the last 1 year to 18 months, things that are fairly unique to the current situation we're in. I think we could probably all agree that the last 1 year to 18 months has been pretty unique. We've got a global pandemic that has occurred, but we've also seen some things evolving when it comes to just the sharing or information that is becoming not only just available, but widely accepted by the public. So we see information coming from left, right, and center, and I don't mean that in a political sense. I mean that in a literal sense. Information is everywhere. Social media is wildly popular and a means of getting that information. And also news organizations have broader grasps. It's not, the barriers of entry to put or produce information out there into the world are significantly lower today than they were 10 years ago. So what are we seeing? So in the public, people are questioning what is actually reliable. People have to choose what is trustworthy, what is objective or factual, and versus what is opinion. And this doesn't have to, once again, just do with politics. This has to do with just general information. This also has to do with trends that we're seeing in divisions in ideologies. So because information is more readily available and those barriers to entry to share information are lowered, it's much easier for that information to be picked up or accepted by particular groups. So what are some of the impacts or implications of this scenario that we have? So we're actually seeing a large amount of distrust coming about because of this. So people have to question or really focus on, is the information that they're getting, seeing, or receiving factual? And that's not always easy anymore. Typically we had trusted news outlets, but that's something that isn't as clearly defined as it was before in the past. And beyond news, this is also carries over into organizations, whether it be governments or health organizations. People have to decide, can they trust the information that they're receiving from their governments or from the health organizations that are giving them advice. And the reason I say health organizations, obviously, is because of the situation we're in today with a global pandemic. So because you have to question this information, it creates a lot of distrust in other people and also positions of authority. Now, another effect of that is that this makes it more easy for criminals or bad players to play to those sympathies. People tend to gravitate to areas where they feel comfortable or find that trust. And it's not always a reliable source. And criminals can find that they can better focus their efforts to play to particular sympathies or ideologies, because there's more of a congregation to those particular groups. And the internet has obviously made that much more accessible for people to find those groups of people who are sharing similar ideologies. And the criminals are a part of that group, and we're seeing that. Now, to play into that, they're also trying, as a criminal, take advantage of the situations that they're presented. COVID-19 being one example of that. If people are looking to, view that as an issue or a problem, they want to, solve that problem. And criminals can present, schemes, false products, false cures. These are things that we're seeing as trends. This isn't something new. The snake oil salesman is the common terminology or phrase, and this applies to any type of event, especially a global event like COVID-19 has been. And similarly, because information is more public, it's more readily available, you also have that element of embarrassment when it comes to actually being a victim. You don't want to be, seen as, silly or stupid or foolish if you do end up making a mistake. And something we're seeing is that victims are being less likely to report a crime that they're involved in. So if there is some type of fraud, this could be public, and their friends, their family, other people on the internet could see this. So we're seeing people being less likely to report those crimes. Some of the graphics that we're showing here is also showing a trend in, because people can very specifically pick and choose the audiences or the information that they're receiving, we're seeing less overlap with these ideologies. Some of these examples that we're seeing here are American focused, and I think that's probably a good example because of the two-party political system within America. But the trend that we're seeing globally is that the left and the right, when it comes to ideologies, are separating farther and farther apart. that middle ground or overlap of where people share common ideas or are willing to accept other ideas or facts and opinions that may not align with their own ideals, that's pushing farther and farther apart. And that's a trend that we're seeing not just within America, but globally. Now, going along with the situation that we're in today is also an increased digitization. We all know screen time is up. We're not there in person today. We're doing this virtually as was done last year, where most people are working from home. They're facing a screen every day and having less personal interaction. So with that screen time being up, we're fully reliant on that screen to not just do our jobs, but also carry out parts of our day-to-day lives that we hadn't had to do before in the past. So with this increased digitization, we're seeing it both from a supply side as well as a demand side. Looking at the supply side of things, obviously when moving to remote work, moving to things where you can't have that face-to-face interaction, there's new remote access procedures or ways to access information that you typically would have to in person before. And this is something new. This is something that's evolving. So from a supply side, we're seeing that push into digital methods or digital means rather than human face-to-face practices that were commonly done in the past. Now, we're also seeing these in-person means of criminal activity changing. So people are home more often nowadays. There's less public places to go to. Hopefully that's changing and things are opening up and we can kind of enjoy a public social life more and more, but people are home more and they have been over the last year. So what does that mean for crime? Well, you're less likely to break into a house if you know that somebody is home, or you're less likely to rob somebody if there are other things such as home security measures that are now much more accessible or in place. So we're seeing that trend of people being home and being around their physical property more, but also this growth in home security products. So the everyday person can go online and buy a home security system or a home webcam that's a fraction of the price that it was in years past. So they have these accessible security measures that in place, and criminals see that, and they're moving on to these different means when it comes to actually facilitating crimes digitally rather than in person. Now, on the demand side, we're also seeing trends that carried before COVID-19. Online shopping, home delivery, not having to be physically present to make some type of purchase or transaction. That has always been something that has been trending over time. But also, people are demanding those types of services more and more. For example, online banking isn't new, but there is more and more demand to not have to visit a bank in person. COVID-19 just happened to be something that sort of supported that push to that digitization. So we're seeing this on the demand side as well. Now, sort of going along with that, not just people being home, but people are doing things online that they didn't have to do before. Grocery shopping, but also, seeing your doctor or getting advice from your doctor or GP is something that has become digitized. So information that's being shared digitally is increasing, and it's also getting broader in its scope. Now, this presents more opportunities for criminals or financial crime to occur when these new doors are opening up. Additionally, we're seeing society having to sacrifice some of these elements of security or privacy. If I need to see my doctor and I have to share personal information, I don't have too many options anymore. And that's a trend that we've seen over the last year. So there has to be some sacrifices, or we've seen some sacrifices being made, to facilitate the world that we're in right now. We're also seeing some sacrifices from that security standpoint, in physical situations as well. So could you ever imagine 2 years ago going into a bank with a mask on and security not batting an eye? Well, that's the situation we're in. If you're lucky enough to have a bank that's open and you go to do a transaction there, you're probably expected to wear a mask. So that security, of that assurance that security would see somebody with a mask, that's kind of a red flag. That guard has come down, or that red flag is diminished, or the security camera systems viewing somebody and being able to identify them. Well, if they're wearing a mask, that's been diminished. So we see criminals taking advantage of that. If stores and banks, typically had a public presence, and there's less likelihood for a crime to be committed there. But now that things are closed, security's not monitoring it, a physical person being there, we're seeing criminals take advantage of that as well. So just a couple of headlines that we've seen. There's been crimes where criminals are breaking into banks knowing that security is not present. No, they're just relying on security cameras, which kind of allows them to access the facilities of the bank more easily. Even crimes where criminals go undetected into a bank simply because they're allowed to conceal their identity by doing so. So because these physical presences have evolved in society, we're also seeing criminal activity evolve as well. So with the latest Europol report, there was a heavy focus on financial crime being performed in a digital sense. So cybercrime is something that continues to be a top area of concern within the Europol reports. And according to that report, the means and the methods that criminals are using to facilitate cybercrime aren't changing drastically in terms of the methods that they're following. However, the narrative or the stories, how they're using those methods has evolved and changed with the times. So it could be playing into those sympathies or playing into those situations that people are facing today that I was just talking about before. So criminals taking advantages of new situations or societal norms that have come up. And what we're also seeing is different forms of social engineering. So social engineering, I'll talk a little bit about in just a couple of minutes here, but this is something that we're seeing as a rising trend. It's a method that's been around for years when it comes to stealing information from people by taking information or playing into the societal factors that we see today and using that to steal information and commit financial crime. And what we're also seeing is a shift or a change in how payments or financial crime can be supported in an asset or in a financial sense, with a new form of an asset, cryptocurrencies, becoming more and more not just widely accepted, but also more acceptable to the public. So we're seeing that evolution as well when it comes to the assets involved with financial crime. So some of the things that we wanted to talk about, these are things coming from the Europol report, but also trends that we're seeing from other areas that are monitoring financial crime. So some of the things we'll talk about are ransomware. We'll also talk about specific social engineering scams that are of high concern and we're seeing as upcoming trends. And we'll also take a look at different types of investment fraud that are now being facilitated. So one of the largest areas we're seeing is a growth, well, not so much a growth, but a more pervasive element of ransomware. So just sort of to level set what exactly is ransomware. This is where a hacking or an access type situation will occur, and criminals will encrypt or hold ransom digital or virtual resources of a particular company or individual, and they'll only release that information in exchange for a payment. We've seen a lot of examples of this recently. I'll talk about a few examples that we've seen just within the last month or so. But it affects just larger populations than just the company that is the victim of this ransomware attack. And for some of the situations I'll talk about, organizations no longer have a local view. Everything is global, information is shared, and this becomes more pervasive, or it spreads out across society when these types of situations occur. And if we want to think about how pervasive this is, we're referencing a survey here from over 5,000 IT professionals across 30 different countries, and about 40%, 37% were saying that they experienced the ransomware attack within the last year. Prior to that, when you looked at the 2020 report, which looked across the year 2019, we were seeing over 50%. 51% is what we were seeing in terms of a company that experienced the ransomware attack. So 1 in 2 people in this meeting, the organization or company that they worked for, was involved with some type of situation like this. So it is something that affects large portions of the global economy. And if we think about the overall costs of this, the average paid is, we're seeing about $170,000 US dollars, using that figure there. That doesn't seem all that expensive when we think about the global economy. However, because this is pervasive and it spreads across multiple areas within the organizations just to address one situation of ransomware, it actually totals out to be millions of dollars. So this considers all the costs of the new systems that have to be set up in place, the human effort to address this type of situation, insurances that need to be put in place or that need to be activated as a result of these types of situations. So it is quite costly. Now, the implications of a ransomware attack, if you were to ever be victim of, or your organization is victim of something like this, it's quite concerning because there's no winning situation here. If the organization involved, doesn't pay the ransom, then there's forced GDPR breaches. Europol was predicting this in their annual crime report back in 2018, that this would become a significant issue. And that has come to fruition, unfortunately. So from the organizational standpoint, if you don't comply with the criminals, obviously your systems are down and there's an impact to your revenues or income. But also, if the criminals do what they say they will do and leak that information, there's also penalties for customer data being leaked or GDPR breaches. Now, if you do go along with the criminals, then you're committing a crime by paying the bad guys. So from a financial standpoint, or from a legal standpoint, you're technically committing a crime there, but you're also empowering the criminals. And if this were to become public, which in a lot of ways it usually does, it also hurts your reputation as a business or an organization. So essentially, these risks or trying to manage ransomware becomes extremely difficult from an organizational standpoint. And it's an area of financial crime or cyber crime specifically that is a high level of focus and is called out within the Europol report in a very significant way this year. Real quick, just a couple of examples we've seen just within the last month or so. In the US, there was a ransomware attack with Colonial Pipeline. You can kind of see on the left-hand side, it's a pipeline that runs from the southern up the eastern coast of the USA that supplies petrol and gasoline. Now, the service was a limited interruption. I think it was only for about a week, but the public heard about this and they started panic buying gasoline or petrol. They were literally filling up plastic bags thinking that there was going to be some type of shortage. And it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. There actually was shortages because people did panic. And the outcome of that is, they actually did pay the criminals around $4 million to resolve this quickly. It got a lot of attention, not just by the public, but by the government, and it disrupted a lot of people's lives. We also had an attack against AXA, one of the largest insurers in the world. And this was a bit retaliatory because AXA has said that as an insurer, they would no longer be supporting ransomware payments as part of their coverage. And then days after making that announcement, their IT operations were experiencing a ransomware attack and demanding money. Now that's insurance information, and being a large insurer, there's the potential that a lot of information, personal information of individuals was stolen there. We also saw a hack of Ireland's HSE, which is their public healthcare system, which theoretically could potentially be every citizen within the Republic of Ireland. So, and very personal information, being healthcare information, that's potentially stolen as part of that. And the demands there were 20 million US dollar ransom payment is what they were requesting there. So, these are quite significant attacks when it comes to ransomware, and we're trying to highlight here that it's not just the company that's effective, but all of society sees a significant impact when these events occur. Now, looking at some of the new, well, not new, but ways that social engineering schemes or scams are being proliferated currently. These are making news today as well. So we're seeing examples of tech support or remote access schemes. So if you kind of think about the example of phishing, where they're trying to gain access to your information, now it's being perpetuated through phone calls or contacting a particular victim, trying to convince them, if they're less tech savvy, that they need to fix their computer, which, being screen focused nowadays, people don't want their computers to have issues. It could significantly impact their lives now that things are more digitized. They'll present a problem that they need to fix, and if people don't have that tech savviness to get it or understand it, they'll give up that private access. And once they give up that access, and they're trying to do this to prevent an issue, they're actually creating an issue. So these people who pose as tech support will steal their information and use it for committing that crime. Similar to that, we're also seeing these schemes pop up in public marketplaces. So these could be things like eBay, or you have Gumtree in the UK. You have different types of Facebook Marketplace, different types of marketplaces that are open to the public and around the world, and criminals are presenting scams there. So they'll initiate contact through that public marketplace. There's usually some type of identifying feature or attribute that they can get there, whether it's your phone number, your email. If it's through Facebook, they could get even more information about you from your profile just by interacting through that public marketplace. And what we're seeing is, claiming to try and perform a secure transaction by doing some type of verification. In some cases, this is being reported as, once they get your email, they'll go and trigger a password reset or a one-time verification code. They'll present this as themselves trying to verify or validate a legitimate transaction. However, they're actually using that to steal that information and take over your account by doing so. So once that account access is given up or shared, there's not a high probability that you can get it back. So this is another type of scheme or scam that has been coming up. And we also have other examples of account leaks. In this case, there was an organization called Infinity Black that were stealing account credentials for reward programs, producing scripts to test out these credentials to see if they could actually gain access to these types of reward programs, like frequent flyer miles or hotel points, things like that. And once again, once these stolen passwords or accounts are proliferated, they're stealing those potential rewards and committing a crime there by exchanging them for goods. So we're seeing a lot of ways that accounts or personal information can be stolen from the public. And this kind of goes back to that point where the crimes themselves hasn't drastically changed. It's just new methods, or there's a new narrative or story around it. Now, some other things that tend to be a little bit newer that are also coming up are frauds that incur what is referred to as SIM swapping and smishing. Smishing is kind of a funny word to say, but it's a combination of SMS or text messages and phishing. So I'm sure a lot of us, if we look back, 2, 3, 5 years, you always got those emails that looked a little bit, scammy. Even going back 10 years, we didn't have those, junk or spam filters on our inboxes, and you get these emails, and if you click the link in the email, you're giving up, some information or access to, your computer, your systems that you're connected to. We're now seeing this being proliferated through SMS. So this is actually on the right-hand side. I've got a screenshot. This was an SMS that I actually received. It had to do, they were pretending to be the HMRC, which is the Revenue and Customs for the UK, where I live. And they're trying to say, hey, you've got a tax refund. There's money here for you. Just click this link and you can go get it. Well, I know that's not the URL to the HMRC. However, it sounds enticing, and one click, I could have easily given up that information. Even just yesterday, there was a news story here in the UK where 8 individuals were arrested across the UK for proliferating these types of smishing schemes to try and steal personal information from individuals with these fraudulent URL links through SMS messages. And we're also seeing something called SIM swapping. And This is unique in that it usually doesn't involve the individual, where the fraudster will contact the mobile phone carrier, and they will try to, or sometimes successfully, get that mobile phone carrier to switch the mobile phone number from one SIM card to another. Now, mobile phone carriers were never intended to be a means of security or authentication. To try and fight different ways that people were stealing emails and passwords, these other authentication methods were designed. However, mobile phone companies weren't exactly consulted around them being an authority of security or authentication. It's just something that's sort of evolved as something that was thought to be a reliable means. Only one person has one mobile phone number. Now we're seeing that, it is possible for these mobile phone numbers to be stolen. Mobile phone carriers don't necessarily have the same security methods that a bank might have, or the authentication or verification methods that banks might have. And those can be taken advantage of. So we're seeing criminals contacting these mobile phone carriers, getting phone numbers switched over. And then when these one-time verification text messages or even emails are being sent, they're using that mobile phone number to bypass that second point of authentication, or that second authentication factor. So this is sort of a trend that's evolved. We were thinking you're making things more secure by putting additional hurdles in place. However, it just creates another entry point for criminals to exploit. Now, another point that we wanted to raise up here is the role of cryptocurrency that we're seeing in a couple of ways. One is that it's a new asset that gets a lot of attention within the news. It's a highly volatile asset, so we'll see, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all kinds of different cryptocurrencies being in the news and having these massive gains, and people don't want to miss out on potential investment opportunities. However, they don't always necessarily understand what's involved with cryptocurrency. So not only is there a high level of exposure to people, it's not just the news, it's also influencers, or Elon Musk is a big proponent, and he's got a huge following within the world. And like I said, people don't want to miss out on something that could make them a lot of money. That's very natural. But what we're also seeing is that old traditional methods are playing into these current sympathies. It's kind of the trend we're seeing. We had some examples with Plus Token or Woe Token. These were Ponzi schemes that were in some ways multi-level marketing schemes where it ultimately came down to a Ponzi scheme where it relied on new members and investment to live up to the promises of the returns that they could promise to their investors. So a Ponzi scheme is nothing new. However, we're seeing this with things like cryptocurrency, where people don't understand it, or they may not be fully aware of the situation. Now, what we're also seeing with cryptocurrency is that, before it sort of has maybe a dirty past when it comes to criminality due to the anonymity of cryptocurrency transactions. But a lot of that is being addressed with current regulation. Just a quick, fact that we have there is that last year, 74% of Bitcoin moved from one exchange to another. So you can kind of think of that being, from one bank to another bank. That was a cross-border transaction. So 3/4 roughly of crypto moving from one exchange to another being international. And really, if one exchange doesn't have the same compliance or AML standards that another exchange has, then we're seeing the possibility for cryptocurrency to be used to facilitate cross-border transactions that typically couldn't be performed in the traditional financial markets. Now, this is important because the EU recognized this and they addressed it through the 5th Money Laundering Directive. Crypto exchanges and wallets were added to the scope of the 5th Money Laundering Directive, and that was implemented in January 2020. And what we're seeing as a result of that, and it's hard to say that this is causation, but we are seeing the correlation there that after the implementation of that, we're seeing criminal funds dropping from these exchange to exchange by about 40%. So we're highlighting that global AML standards are important here, and this applies to all assets, including cryptocurrency, that we're seeing as a as a trend today. I'm actually going to jump ahead a little bit in terms of, we were talking about cybercrime, but organized crime still is there, and it's something that's important today, and Europol recognizes that. What we're looking at here are some specific facts that were raised up in the latest Europol report. 80% of organized crime is happening through legitimate businesses. So that makes it hard to, really find and understand where organized crime might be operating, but it's still proliferated throughout the world. And 68% of them are using common money laundering methods. So once again, we're kind of thinking back that the means haven't changed that much. It's just sort of evolving to meet the current market or landscape. And we're also seeing more of an international breadth of organized crimes as well. That last stat that we have there, 75% or 70% of criminal networks are active in more than 3 countries within the EU. So that Europol statistic means that this crime is proliferating in not just focused areas, but across the EU. Another headline or focus area that we've seen around organized crime. This is a specific example that is happening within North America, so not within the EU, but it is global in scale. So Mexican cartels have a lot of illicit funds, and in order to clean those funds, a scheme that they've been utilizing more recently is that they will launder money through small Chinese-owned businesses within the US and Mexico. These Chinese-owned businesses will have some type of account, and they will use burner phones with Chinese banking apps to move their funds out of North America into China. And once they're in China, there's limited oversight of these funds. So it's not within the purview of the financial standards that we have in place with other jurisdictions. And then that money is then moved from China back to these Mexican cartels. So it's cleaned, and the trend is that they're uncovering more and more of these situations with these Chinese brokers laundering money on behalf of the Mexican cartels. Now, why would somebody do that? Now, obviously, you can make money this way, but we're also seeing a rising trend in criminal organizations using violence as a means of control. So it's not so much a greed element, but it could also be the power that Mexican cartels have when it comes to the threat of violence. Okay, so we've seen some examples that we've noticed in the marketplace, and what we're kind of seeing now is that some of these things will hopefully and likely be addressed with the new 6th money laundering directive that has now been enacted. So just to quickly summarize the benefits that the 6th money laundering directive will bring, and this is something that is due for implementation within a week. So hopefully most people here have some type of understanding of it, but just to quickly highlight some of the features or maybe benefits, so to say, is that there's much more focus on standardization. So we're seeing, if I could just jump ahead real quick to this point, we're seeing a standardization around predicate offenses. So, making a distinct statement on, these are the crimes that organizations need to focus on when it comes to fighting money laundering and fighting financial crime. Before it was just sort of, the FATF had recommendations, but now we actually have these predicate offenses firmly outlined within this directive. We also have more focus on harmonization. So making sure that these standards are set across all EU member states, making sure that organizations have that responsibility to work together to fight financial crime if they do find it, and also making sure that the punishments for not following the rules are in line with that harmonization effort. Now, if you have the chance, Google Refinitiv 6 money laundering directive. One of our colleagues, Nabil, has wrote a good piece to kind of help summarize or give you a good understanding of what the 6 money laundering directive brings and why that's important for the financial and compliance community. Now, to kind of tie this all together, at Refinitiv, we see these trends in the marketplace, and we see the directives being brought into place. So how's Refinitiv responding to these things that we see and understand? So to fight financial crime, Chris is going to talk a little bit more about WorldCheck, but now that we've moved into more of a digital space and we're moving away from less human interaction when it comes to, digitizing transactions or, common financial activities that were being done before are being more digitized. Refinitiv has a solution to support our clients that need to implement these AML standards. So one of those solutions is our quality solution, and this is meant to support digital AML or digital KYC for your customers, where you don't have that face-to-face interaction because we're moving away from that, or we're seeing a trend of moving away from that. So what Quality brings to the marketplace is a flexible means to support your KYC and onboarding procedures through automated document authentication. If you're not there in person to see a document, you want to make sure that it is legitimate, hasn't been tampered with, and you want that process to be as quick and efficient as possible. So document authentication is a key feature of the solution that we bring. You also want to make sure that that document hasn't been stolen and the person giving you that document is who they say they are. And to support that, we have liveness and facial matching technology. So I can't steal Christopher Stringham's ID, use it to open an account on his behalf, because that facial matching and liveness testing will know if I'm actually the one uploading that ID document. In addition to that, we also have a means to perform identity verification. So once again, supporting, can I verify the identity or personal details of this customer in a secure, fast, and automated way? So the identity verification feature of this product not only allows me to perform that verification of the personal details, it's a great way to supplement or support the KYC or verification of the information about your customer beyond just an ID document. And then finally, we bring together our WorldCheck screening capabilities. It's a best-in-class solution, and it brings together that AML KYC screening that you can do via WorldCheck. So all of those common steps that you would expect to do from a customer onboarding standpoint through a digital method are supported through this quality solution, and it's something that we're having great conversations about with our clients. And with that, I know we're kind of tight on time here, but I wanted to pass it over to my colleague Chris to talk a little bit more about how WorldCheck and the underlying content supports KYC and AML.
Thank you, Paul, very much for this presentation. It was impressive. I do have one question for you. Maybe you can share with us your opinion about that. You have mentioned onboarding online clients, and is there any kind of changes respect of AML risk from the perspective of the regulators? Are they accepting this as a little bit less risky activities to make an onboarding through online of the certain group of clients, not maybe all, but relatively medium and low risk clients? Is it acceptable for the regulator now on, or is there any changes regarding this pandemic or anything similar?
Yeah, so this is going to vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but we are seeing a focus of this within the legislation or directives coming from the regulators within the country, where this is becoming more acceptable within the market.
Clear.
And
well
also
documented.
Yeah, well documented, but also openness to explore new technologies by having user groups or focus groups to see if these technologies are suitable and trustworthy, and making sure that the legislation reflects the technologies that are available today.
Okay, thanks for the answer. Thank you very much. Christoph, now it's your time.
Yep, and I have 5 minutes. I might go over a little bit slightly, but
yes, I know your 5 minutes.
So thanks, Paul, for talking us through that. There's a lot of interesting stuff going along in a lot of new typologies and new risks. The digital identity stuff is very important. Like Paul said, regulators are getting more open to the idea of non-face-to-face onboarding. There's a lot of regulatory differences in a lot of jurisdictions on that. Some countries require videos, some don't, some allow it. But, identifying whether or not a document is a valid document or not, that's something that is sometimes kind of difficult even in a face-to-face setting. I mean, I'm pretty good with fake IDs, but depending on where the document's coming from, sometimes I still need to open up Prado or something to figure out exactly what's each document supposed to look like. Had a really interesting case with Russian domestic passports last week. Apparently they're really common. I hadn't seen it before, so it took me about half an hour to figure out what I was looking at. And that's, a waste of time. It's great if you have a system that just does it for you. Paul, can we move to the next slide?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so we've been watching all this stuff. We've been watching these trends. There's a lot of stuff happening. And what does that mean actually then for you? What does this mean for WorldCheck? Well, it means we're watching things constantly and we're adding information into WorldCheck that's relevant, that's reliable, so that you don't have to do it. Now, we're not going to find everything in WorldCheck, but we're going to find things that you care about. As Paul mentioned, there's a lot of issues regarding trust around the world. And that's not only a person-to-person basis, it's also a country basis. And one of the things that countries do when they don't trust each other or they get annoyed with each other is they apply sanctions, economic sanctions against each other. And this has become one of the most widely used foreign policy tools in the last couple years. And even this week, we see new European Union sanctions against Belarus for the plane diversion incident earlier in the week. So, there's constantly new sanctions programs going out, getting implemented. They're getting to be more stricter. They're requiring considerations of securities. And we're staying up on top of that. We have a dedicated team of sanctions professionals. We monitor every known sanctions regime around the world. We're looking for new sanctions regimes. And, we stay on top of this so that you don't have to. Or at least you don't have to do it as much. In the last couple of years, we've been talking a lot about PEPs. Actually, in that space, I think things have actually kind of settled down. But with the 6 money laundering directives, there's been renewed focus on adverse media content. And 6 money laundering directive is actually an issue of harmonization. It's about making sure that all EU member states finally adopt the FATF 2012 recommendations and the designated categories of offenses. And it's also about making sure that everybody finally actually adopts the provisions of the 2005 Warsaw Convention. This is where actually Serbia is already ahead of the game. You guys have adopted and ratified the 2005 Warsaw Convention. A bunch of EU member states haven't. So we're getting to be having a nice level of harmonization. And the good news actually is that when people ask, is WorldCheck content aligned to the 6 money laundering directive? The answer is yes. We've been aligned to the 6 money laundering directive since 2012 when we adopted the FATF guidelines as our basis for adverse media content. Because we're looking at the laws out there, we're looking at the changes, and we're seeing what kind of information is relevant to you and to our other clients, and we're collecting the data as best as we can that is relevant and where there's a legal need to screen it. And in addition to the money laundering directives, we're also seeing a lot more in the area of human rights and supply chain regulation. Environmental crime is an area that's been a hot topic recently. Actually, it was the COVID outbreak. We know COVID jumped from bats to people. We don't know what the connection was yet. There's a lot of discussion about how that happened. But, one of the concerns is that through illegal wildlife activity, hygienic standards weren't adhered to, and that's maybe a contributing factor to the pandemic. So, the things that we're looking at have a real life impact on people in our society. And we're trying to collect data to help you make good decisions about who you want to do business with and how you're going to manage the risks of those people. Next slide, Paul. All right, so just to be clear, we don't capture every single thing out there in the news regarding accusations and stuff. What we care about is some sort of official action that police or law enforcement agencies or regulatory agencies have gone out and have accused somebody, questioned somebody, investigated, etc., relating to one of those FATF crimes or one of those other topics that shows up in the legislation. Now, obviously, investigative journalism media is very, very important for identifying problems, and we shouldn't forget that. We actually can offer news feeds to help kind of find that kind of stuff. But when it comes to world check screening, what we really care about, because it's something you're gonna be doing for everybody, is really good quality information. And we shouldn't underestimate how important that is. If you're doing business with a client and you've identified them and you know who they are, and you just don't know enough about them to be 100% sure if they're a bad guy or if you need to do a suspicions transaction report, but then you get a world check alert saying police have arrested this guy, well, suddenly you have a really good reason to actually do an investigation. You can maybe put the pieces together and you can say, wait a minute, if this guy has potentially been involved with some sort of crime, well, now these transactions make sense. And now actually I know what the story is. Now I can actually go to the police and contribute and to the investigation and try to freeze the money. There's actually a case in the United States where a large European bank got fined by the New York regulatory authorities. Well, they didn't put the pieces together. A guy, there was a specific person, and he was using the bank's services to procure underage women in sort of forced sexual exploitation. The bank should have realized what was going on, but because they weren't thinking about the accusations and they weren't putting stuff together, they failed to make the relevant requirement declarations to the authorities, and they kept the relationship active with the person. They should have been putting the stuff together because the person had been accused of these crimes before. He had been arrested and convicted of the crimes before, got out of jail, was at it again. Banks should have realized it, and they didn't. And we want to help you avoid that type of situation. Next slide, Paul. All right, so here's a nice overview of the types of crimes that we're looking at. What's important here is that even though we've been collecting this data for many, many years, it's not necessarily the easiest to read in our database right now. We've acknowledged that, we've seen it. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna start adding tags to all of the records. We call these special interest categories. So if somebody's been accused or convicted or questioned regarding fraud, we'll put a nice big fraud tag there. So on the one hand, you can sort the types of data you're going to be searching through. And the second, once you have a hit, you'll know quite quickly what it's about. It's going to be a nice, neat feature that we're rolling out this year. I'm sorry for speeding through it, kind of up in my time. But, in World Check, that's a nice final overview, and then we'll go to the last slide. We cover information that shows up in official lists, whether they're sanctions lists, law enforcement lists. We look for people where there's some sort of fraud connection or adverse media connection. We look for politically exposed persons and relatives. That's all structured. That's nice and easy to use in World Check. And we also have a media check solution, which provides a raw media feed of news content that we can help you sort and find relevant news related to financial crime about. And I went over by 3 minutes. I'm very, very sorry, but I hope that you found the session interesting. I'm really looking forward to coming to Serbia next year. And I'd love for anybody to reach out to me and Paul. I think Paul would also enjoy talking to anybody if you have any more questions or there was anything in there that you thought, oh, that was so interesting. We want to continue discussion. Just let us know, reach out to us. You can find me on LinkedIn or Simon can give us give the email address. But thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Chris and Paul. It was very impressive. All information you have provided in 5 minutes. As always. If there is no question, I will check. No question in this moment. I will close this session just with the information what we expect for tomorrow. We start a little bit later in 11 o'clock. We will discuss about personal data compliance governance. Our next sponsor is SAS Perspective, and the personal data protection will be topic for tomorrow, partly. And afterwards, we will have a discussion and presentation about standard regarding anti-corruption, as well as the guest will be anti-corruption agency. So basically, Thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon. I hope so that weather is wherever you are. I don't know, Paul, are you in Vienna as well?
I'm in London, but maybe you can see it's nice and sunny today.
Okay, sunny everywhere. Perfect. So basically, have a nice afternoon, and I hope so that we will see you soon next year in Serbia. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Bye, Chris.
Bye. Thanks. Have a nice day.